Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. Don't turn off the screen. I know Linnea's not here. You're going to have to deal with Donald Kendal for this week. Linnea is out recording with John Stossel or something over in New York. I'm not entirely sure, but we have got a good show for you. I've only been gone for a couple of months, but I swear the world has gone insane. Suddenly, the left is burning the most popular electric vehicles while a Republican president promotes them in the front of the White House. No, the world did not go insane. It was driven to insanity by an incredibly corrupt media system, a media system that has lied to us about virtually everything for the past, I don't even know how long. We're going to cover these topics and more on episode 487 of the In the Tank podcast. Yes, that's right. I said it during the cold open, but you're going to have to deal with me this week. Donald Kendal returning as host of the In the Tank podcast, only for this week. Don't worry, Linnea will be back. I already saw the numbers drop when you guys saw my face, but you're going to have to bear with me. We got a lot of good topics that we're going to be talking about. We're going to get into it. So this is kind of the normal crew. If you go back to 2024, we got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing just fine. I'm a little, well, I'm not cranky enough yet. So hopefully, we are talking about the media, and that usually does get me pretty cranky. So, which is where I need to be for this show. That's kind of my position here on that deal. But yeah, it's nice to have you back. And very sharp-eyed viewers will notice, I believe, Donnie, you were wearing the exact same top that you are in the intro video that we recorded years ago. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and actually, I wore this specifically because it's got a zipper down. I wanted to show off my shirt. 10 internet points to anyone that could figure out the what this is referencing. Jim and Chris, you can stay quiet. I'll look in the comments for the winner for that one. I'll give you one more good look at it. Anyone understand the reference? Yes, I don't know. We'll find out. But I do see some happy comments in there about me returning as host. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to be riding your people's enthusiasm, so keep the comments coming. Also joining us, we have Chris Talgo. He is the editorial director here at the Heartland Institute and apparently losing in the golf fantasy league that he's in. So he's in a sour mood. How are you doing today, Chris?
Well, Donnie, like you, I'm wearing a really cool shirt, so I'm going to show the audience.
Oh, what is this?
I know that Jim loves this one. First concert I ever went to. It's great. It was great.
Nice. There you go.
25 years ago, probably like to this day, actually, almost. So yeah.
Yes. So like I said, Linnea is off gallivanting in New York City. She is going to be recording with John Stossel on some climate change topics or something along those lines. Jim, is she going to be back in time for the Climate Realism show tomorrow? That's the big question.
I think not, actually. So, we do have at least one special guest, maybe two special guests on tomorrow's The Climate Realism show. Matthew Wylicki will be joining us, and perhaps even Steve Malloy. But Linnea, yeah, she's. This is actually really, really cool. I mean, John Stossel reached out to us and wanted to have Linnea featured in a video he's doing talking about, we presume environment and climate topics. We're not really quite sure exactly what he's going to be getting to, but it's pretty exciting. He has millions of fans. All the videos he puts out on these topics get many millions of views. So this is fantastic. opportunity for Linnea and for the Heartland Institute. And thank you, John Stossel. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, clearly Linnea as well. Go ahead,
I was
Chris.
going to say, just real quick, John Stossel, he's from the town that I am from, so that's pretty cool. He went to the high school I went to. That's even cooler. He also was one of the first, I'd just say, like, libertarian influencers that really got me thinking down this path. I've read all his books. I used to watch his show on Fox Business. And even way back in the day, he was on 2020, and I remember that. So John Stossel is a great guy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's been a speaker at our benefit dinner before. Actually, one of the first, this is a little history lesson here. One of the first interactions that I ever had with the Heartland Institute was me going as like a high school student, maybe a college student, to a Heartland Institute event where they had John Stossel speaking about his book, No They Can't, I think it was called. And I think Jim yelled at me or something because I sat in the wrong chair. But that's for the history books to decide. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Oh, actually, you know what? I was going to say one other thing. This is also to kind of promote our stuff, that Linnea is definitely in the right mindset to do an interview like Jim was describing, because she is the figurehead of our climate realism or climate at a glance videos that we've been putting out regularly on our YouTube channel. There's 2-3 minute short things on one specific topic, very easily consumable with a beautiful thumbnail in case you're looking at our YouTube page. But those have been very popular and probably one way or another kind of led to this opportunity with John Stossel. So good luck, Linnea, and she'll be back next week. Don't you worry. But we got a lot of topics to get into, so let's go. Oh, I see some comments in the side there. Wheelman says, Atlas shrugged. You are right. 10 fake internet points to you, Wheelman. Great job. All right. So let's get down to business here. Tesla vehicles, dealerships, and charging stations have been vandalized, suffering arson attacks, and face protests since the company's CEO Elon Musk began his work with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, leading to mass layoffs of federal workers, authorities said. So I am reading from an ABC News article, which is an article that I found had a very nice outline of kind of all of these arson attacks and vandalism attacks on Tesla vehicles in the past couple of months. So I'm just going to run through a handful of these. This is just me reading from the article. It says the latest suspicious incident occurred overnight in Dedham, Massachusetts, where 3 Teslas were vandalized, according to the Dedham Police Department. Officials said words have been spray painted on 2 Tesla Cybertrucks, with all 4 tires of the trucks and a Tesla Model S being reportedly damaged. Teslas were also damaged in Seattle on Sunday night, where crews had to extinguish a fire involving 4 electric vehicles, according to the Seattle Fire Department. 6 Teslas were also vandalized at a Tesla dealership in Linwood, Washington on Saturday, where 1 black Tesla Cybertruck was graffitied with swastikas, according to that police department. A Tesla charging station in South Carolina was targeted on Friday, where an unknown individual spray painted an expletive directed at President Donald Trump, along with "Long Live Ukraine" on a group of red paint on the ground with red paint, and threw homemade Molotov cocktails at the station, according to that police department. Similarly, 7 Tesla charging stations sustained heavy fire-related damage in Massachusetts on March 3rd, according to the Littleton Police Department. The officials determined that the fires were deliberately set. Shots were also fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon, where several bullets damaged 3 cars and shattered windows on March 6th. On March 2nd, another Tesla dealership was spray painted in Maryland, with "No Musk" was written in red spray paint on the windows. And another incendiary event occurred in Colorado, where a woman was arrested on February 27th after police caught her with explosives at a Tesla dealership, according to Loveland Police Department. I will note that I found the listing of all of these kind of interesting, because usually with like media reporting, you kind of start with like the bigger deal stuff first and then kind of get like less important as you go down. I felt like this got more important as we went, because yeah, a lady found with explosives at a Tesla dealership. I feel like that's kind of the lead of the story, not spray painting swastikas, but whatever. So all of this, is obviously a pretty sane and well-adjusted response to Elon Musk wanting to cut government waste in a system that spends trillions and trillions of dollars a year. What are your thoughts on this spat of political violence and property damage and all of that, Jim?
Well, we're part of what we're talking about here is the media's coverage and reaction to it. And, I'm reminded of a phrase that's uttered. It's not original to me, but we've said it a lot on this podcast. The left's violence is speech, and the right's speech is turned into violence. And here we have, lefties going absolutely insane and violent and destructive. And the media basically just shrugs or celebrates it. Chris, you're the one who we don't force you to do it, but you're the one who watches CNN and MSNBC on behalf of the program to keep us informed. And I know I've seen clips on X of the Democrat commentators, but the most viral one that always goes is what's that guy's name? Scott something on CNN. It's him versus 7 other lefties, and he kicks their butt every week. But they're downplaying the violence, or even celebrating it. I'm trying to imagine if, say, Trump supporters were, I don't know, destroying solar installations across the country in protest of the green agenda, or in protest of China, whatever, for any reason whatsoever, how that might be covered, and what might happen to those people that were inflicting that criminal violence. I'm not criminal violence, criminal destruction of property, and perhaps even violence. I mean, I'm reminded that the idiots who did the J6 committee kept referring to J6 as the equivalent of 9/11 and Pearl Harbor all wrapped into one, and the worst act in the United States since the Civil War, or maybe the War of 1812. Who knows? But they completely ignored another pretty insurrection-y incident when Donald Trump was president. When, don't you guys remember, during the Summer of Love, I believe it was, when the White House was under attack from a leftist mob, and dozens of cops, not a couple, dozens of cops were assaulted and injured, and the media didn't give a crap about that. And then they ended up going across the street and almost burning to the ground a historic church across the street from the White House. And that was celebrated by our media as just a vigorous expression of speech by people who are righteously angry. And frankly, I'm just really tired of the left being able to get away with this sort of violence morally. They get away with it morally in our media, and frankly, they tend to get away with it with no criminal charges whatsoever. I mean, how many people during the riots all across the country during the Summer of Love in 2020 actually faced any criminal charges? What happened to all those people that set up Chaz in Seattle? Remember that, Donnie? That was a lot of fun. When you were the regular host of this show, we made quite a bit of fun of Chaz, an autonomous zone in the city of Seattle. Nothing happened to those people. And somebody was actually murdered in that utopian city of Chaz in Seattle. The police station in Portland, I believe it was, that was attacked by leftist rioters and even set on fire. That wasn't described as anything other than, frankly, righteous anger by people who have a right, who are right to express themselves in such ways. But you're right, Donnie. It's quite a weird world we live in, when the same left that was demanding that we all get into electric vehicles and celebrating Elon Musk as maybe the greatest entrepreneur and maybe greatest American, immigrant to America in history, is now characterized as a Yahtzee. I don't want to use the word. We have bad enough time on this channel getting demonetized. I'll just say that. It's a weird world, and Republicans celebrating Elon Musk and the Tesla, while the left is now trying to burn Teslas and all this stuff. It's crazy, and it's all why. It's why because as you said, all he's trying to do is use Doge to identify an enormous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in our federal government, and apparently that is a bridge too far for the American left.
Yeah, we'll get to the Trump's response too, but Chris, I'm curious of your thoughts on the spat of political violence, and also your thoughts on some people going out and calling this, domestic terrorism. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene mentioned that. I think Trump even made reference to that. Marjorie Taylor Greene on Twitter posted, quote, these attacks, which seem to involve coordinated acts of vandalism, arson, and other acts of violence, seriously threaten public safety. What is your thoughts on just this in general and the idea that it's like being labeled by some as domestic terrorism?
Okay, first couple things. I did watch about 45 minutes of Anderson Cooper last night just to see how they would, frame all this stuff, because I knew that we'd be talking about a lot of this stuff on the, on the show today. I also even watched about 15 minutes of Chris Hayes. So I was kind of flipping back and forth. I can guarantee
This man
you
needs a raise.
No, they did not. They did not mention this one time in that entire hour. However, what they did mention was how the economy is on the brink of an all-out collapse like we haven't seen since the Great Depression. So they were really going over the top on the economy is about to crash and this is all Trump's fault and all that stuff. So they're trying to, hype that up while they are completely ignoring, and not even mentioning this stuff. Jim kind of touched upon this at the very end of his answer, and I think this is really, really, really important to emphasize and underscore. Why are they doing this? It's because Elon Musk is finally actually going after the fourth branch of government. Elon Musk is actually going after the bureaucracy. He's going after these NGOs. He's going after the swamp. He's going after the deep state, whatever you want to call it. Because what's happened over the past, 50, 60, 70, 80 years is Congress passes bills, and then they give all this money and all this authority to these departments, to these agencies, who then use those funds for NGOs, and it's all just like a big scam. It really is. It's just a giant scam. He is finally, enlightening the American people of how deep this goes, how deep the rot and corruption is in Washington, D.C., and the Democrats, because generally speaking, this is not a partisan thing at all, because Republicans are just as guilty as this as Democrats are. They want all this spending. They want it because it not only gives them, a ribbon cutting ceremony for some stupid bridge in their district or whatever it is. they are addicted to the spending. We do not have a revenue problem in this country. We have a spending problem. Elon Musk is finally addressing that. And it's almost like I got to pinch myself every single day seeing, oh my gosh, the Department of Education is going to lay off half their workforce. This is the greatest thing ever. Of course, CNN, MSNBC, and the liberal mainstream media is saying that this is going to destroy education and all this stuff. We know that that's not the case. So I just want to make that abundantly clear. These people are upset and are hyperbolic about Elon Musk simply because he is finally, after so long, he is finally getting to the root of the problem, and that is this just giant, overspending, corruption, waste, fraud, abuse that is so rampant and widespread throughout this gigantic federal government. Just one last quick statistic. So, I do also watch a lot of Fox Business because I love to see how they are, talking about all this stuff, whether it's terrorists or anything else. And they had a really interesting statistic last night that just jumped out to me. 1929, our federal government's spending was 3% of GDP. What is it today? 25%. What Doge is trying to do is get it back to about 20%. That is not that big of a, right. We're not talking about slashing the federal spending to 1% of GDP. We're talking about going back to the pre-COVID levels. Mm-hmm. And also, in the meantime, just getting rid of a lot of this waste, fraud, and abuse. This is what the American people voted for. This is what we want. And I think that all these, crazy leftists who are, going and burning down, charging stations and, burning, Tesla vehicles, on these lots, it's not resonating with the American people. The American people are not sure. Of course. The American people think this is, atrocious, which it is. So I think they are actually just, their overreaction is showing how political they are and how not in line and in tune with the American people and what the American people want for the future of this country.
Just one quick note. I have a comment on that, but one quick note. Our producer, Andy, says all of our international viewers are confused due to the daylight savings time. I apologize. It is a weird system that we've got over here, and if it caused the show to come out seemingly an hour early, we got to adjust our clocks. So that's just the way it's going to be until about November when we come back to whatever. I don't like daylight savings time, but that's a topic for a different day. I think that a lot of this is just like the media kind of pulling these extremist types and kind of radical types just by the nose. Because like some of the things, and this is what I pointed out in the introduction of this episode, are just like patently contradictory. Where like we've always talked about this idea that the Green New Deal, right? Let's go back to the Green New Deal for a minute. The idea that like the Green New Deal also had to do with universal health care and job guarantees and all of this stuff. And it's just like, why would you spend a penny or a second dealing with any other things other than what you claim to be as the end of the world, the imminent end of the world that is climate change? To me, it's just patently contradictory. It's just incredibly hypocritical, because if the world's coming to an end, who cares if people have good education or whatever? Save the world first, then deal with education. And I feel like the same thing has to we could bring that up in regards to this, where it's like, so what's more important, that Elon Musk cutting waste in the government, or trying to get everybody to save the planet by getting a electric vehicle? It seems like it's just whatever the outrage that the media wants to conjure up is the most important thing of that month or week or day or year. And like now, climate change is and dealing with climate change and getting people on electric vehicles is just put to the side while we deal with the Yahtzee that is that is Elon Musk. It's absolutely insane, but that is the clown world that we find ourselves in.
I got to make one little correction. It's not the Green New Deal. It's the Green New Scam.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yes.
So now I want to talk about the other side of the coin. So to counter these acts of violence and property destruction targeting Elon, Donald Trump went out of his way to support Elon Musk, even going as far as hosting a pro-Tesla media stunt outside the White House. Donald Trump was joined by Musk in an assortment of Tesla vehicles, where Donald Trump picked out one of the more popular Tesla electric vehicles to buy, calling Tesla a great American company. During this event, Elon even pledged to double the electric vehicle production in the United States. So just think about this for just 1 minute. We're sitting in the year 2025. Liberals are vandalizing and torching the by far most popular electric vehicle out there on the market, making them out to be Yahtzee cars. Simultaneously, you have a Republican president doing an advertisement for electric vehicles outside of the White House. I'm not sure what's on your 2025 bingo card, but I would not have predicted this even a year ago. And clearly, the intention of the media stunt in front of the White House was to make Tesla EVs more attractive to Republicans and conservatives, despite the fundamentals of EVs not changing. They're still very largely impractical to most drivers. They still require far more rare earth material than their gas-powered alternatives. They're still more likely to explode into uncontrolled fires and everything else that we talk about electric vehicles. But it's just, I've been gone for like 2 months. The world has changed. It's just too bizarre to try to keep up with. Jim, what's your take on all this?
Well, Donald Trump himself was making fun of electric vehicles, and his policies early on before he was elected, he talked about getting rid of it was a cornerstone of his environment and energy policy was to get rid of the electric vehicle mandate, which he has done. And right from the very beginning, Elon Musk was, well, that's fine with me, because he knows he's the number one electric EV maker in the country. He's the only company that's able to make a profit on EVs. We on this podcast, me especially, would criticize Elon Musk, building his business on the backs of taxpayers with all the subsidies and tax breaks that he was able to get to build that company. And as you said, electric vehicles are not for everyone. But the idea of Donald Trump and Republicans now embracing, everything, the world really does seem flipped upside down, because literally a year ago, the same people burning, trying to burn all of the Teslas down and attacking Tesla dealerships were the same people that would mandate that you can only drive an electric vehicle. And now here you have it. Instead of mandating that everyone drive them, they're trying to destroy all of them. So
yeah, right. There is
somebody in a fit of they're throwing a tantrum.
Right. There are people out there that right now are like simultaneously like crying over the idea of subsidies for electric vehicles being taken away while spray painting a swastika on an electric vehicle. It's just clown world that we're in, folks.
A couple of things here. So first of all, I remember right after Trump got elected and, Musk had a prominent role in the White House that people like Sheryl Crow were, selling their Teslas and making such a big deal about it. So I just thought that was, funny in and of itself. But I think there's a couple things here. So I don't think Republicans by nature are anti-EVs. What we're against is the government saying you have to do this.
Fair.
If someone, I have a couple of friends and they live in the city and they have EVs and they say, hey, it works for me. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's not like I have some antipathy towards EVs in general. If it's a right fit for someone, that's totally fine. But it's when, the Biden administration tried to mandate and also ban the internal combustion engine. That's when I think it starts to become a problem. I agree with you on the subsidies. I don't like them. They are still in place. So those aren't going away anytime soon, as far as I know. But it's just so striking to me how Elon Musk, who's a brilliant businessman, we all know that, is losing money. Tesla stock is down, way down. He was asked by Larry Kudlow on Monday, how are you able to run your businesses right now while doing this? And he basically was like, Larry, I can't run my businesses. My businesses are struggling big time. So this whole narrative that the left and the mainstream media is saying that Elon Musk is really in this just to make all this money, it makes no sense.
Right.
He's losing money. He's not in this to make money. He's not in this. This is not a grift at all. He's doing this and he's making huge sacrifices, not only to his to his persona and his reputation, but also to his businesses. And I think that he's putting his money where his mouth is, and we should actually really look up to him for doing that. I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I was not the biggest fan of Elon Musk before he made this kind of transition and was more about free speech and all that, but I do agree with him on most things. I don't think he's a hardcore libertarian. I don't think we agree with, he probably doesn't agree with me on 80% of things, but I think on some of the big things like government corruption and just getting this spending under control, that is something that like 80% of Americans agree on. And Elon Musk is doing that, and he's a brave person, and he has a lot of courage for doing it and sticking with it. And this idea that like the president can't have people like that in his in his orbit is just ridiculous. George Washington had Benjamin Franklin in the White House because Benjamin Franklin was a very good businessman and an innovator and an entrepreneur, and he could help. So this is not out of the ordinary. This is actually quite ordinary.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point about the idea that conservatives aren't necessarily by the definition against electric vehicles. It's about the government force and subsidizing of that. I will put a little bit more nuance onto that, just to kind of counter it a little bit. But generally, I agree with you that this whole EV system and infrastructure is built up with tons of government spending.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and all the billions of dollars put towards building charging stations and all of that. None of those things are because of the free market. It's all government interference, that sort of stuff. But in principle, I agree with what you're saying. Let's move on. You mentioned the Larry Kudlow thing. That's a good transition to our second topic, because apparently Elon Musk announced on the Larry Kudlow interview that he wants to destroy Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I'm reading from an article. This is from MSN website, whatever. It says the headline is Trump will protect entitlements despite Musk's elimination talk, according to the White House. The paragraph, the introduction to the paragraph says President Donald Trump has been unequivocally clear regarding his promise to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, according to the White House. Despite Elon Musk describing entitlement spending as the big one in terms of cutting and the federal government. So this is how the article is framed, and this is how much of the mainstream media coverage of Elon Musk's remarks have been framed. Elon Musk wants to eliminate Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Of course, this has been echoed throughout social media, the left-wing talking head circuit. On Twitter, many people are sharing a clip of Elon Musk saying, quote, most of the federal spending is in entitlements. So that's the big one to eliminate. So that's not a deep fake. This is a clip from an actual interview with Larry Kudlow. So there you have it. Elon Musk wants to eliminate Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Well, turns out not the truth. And if people read more than just misleading headlines and watched more than just 5 seconds of out of context video, you would know that the media is lying to you. So we have a video. It's more than 5 seconds. It only takes you about 30 seconds. So let's go ahead and play this video that's got just a little bit more context into Elon Musk's remarks. Go ahead and play that video, please.
Here?
Yeah, I think so.
Final report, middle of next year?
Well, we're just getting things done as opposed to writing a report. Like say, reports don't mean anything. You got to actually take action.
Yes.
So the waste report in entitlement spending, which is which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. So that's like the big one to eliminate, because that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year. That is also a mechanism.
Yeah. So, I mean, there you have it. It goes on a little bit further and he explains some of the other kind of implications of the gargantuan entitlement systems that we have. But he's talking about the waste report. He's talking about Doge waste report and identifying waste spending in these entitlement programs. And he's talking about that's the big one to eliminate is the waste, not the program itself, the waste. And if people would just looked for 1 second, I mean, I'll say that a lot of people are just echoing this point, probably just saw the 5-second clip, just saw the headlines and just kind of went with it. But there are certainly people that should know better that are propagating this idea that Elon Musk is saying, "Yep, nope, we're going to take a chainsaw to these entitlement programs and get rid of them completely." It is absolutely not the case. So, Jim, thoughts on the media's handling of this story? Seems to be par for the course.
Well, the media's job is to parrot. The diminishing power of the legacy media is good to see, but their job for a long time has been to parrot Democrat talking points and attack any Republican anywhere in public, and do it in this way. I'm actually reminded of at the end of George W. Bush, when he was reelected in 2004, he had his first press conference, and he talked about he had a lot of political capital and he was going to spend it. And what he was going to spend it on was trying to reform Social Security to make sure it was solvent for future generations. And that lasted. And I think one of the ideas, he was just kicking around some ideas, was like partial privatization. In other words, younger workers could take a portion of their Social Security contributions and put them into the private sector in a 401k and eventually kind of wean that off. That would still sustain the program going into the future. That was considered destroying Social Security. And so it never went anywhere. Just think about how much more stable, even if you included all of it's not just waste, Donnie, it's fraud, all of the Social Security fraud. Even if you still included all that and didn't touch it at all, which is what Elon Musk is trying to do, if we had moved to at least partial privatization for younger workers, the program would be very much still solvent for those at retirement age and almost at retirement age today. Because that was 20 years ago. But we didn't make those kinds of reasonable reforms because the Democratic Party wanted to attack George W. Bush and Republicans for destroying Social Security, and now here we are today, where Elon Musk, with the wonders of new technology, of AI, and with Doge, has been able to very quickly identify an enormous amount of fraud in the Social Security system. Now, was every example of Social Security fraud that Donald Trump brought up in his address to Congress the other day accurate? Was it investigated to make sure that was actually true? Who knows? But the idea that there is no fraud and no waste and no abuse of the Social Security system, which is robbing it of its solvency and taking money out of our pockets. I'm Gen X. I've never thought for my entire working life that I would have Social Security there for me when I retired. And I still actually don't think it'll be there unless reforms like this actually end up coming true. One of the things that Doge has really identified is not just wasteful programs and foolish spending, but the enormous amount of absolute fraud and theft that is going on that has never been investigated. It has never been. We have never tried it. He said it in that clip with Kudlow. He's like, another report. We don't need another report. You know, I'm old enough to remember when we had reports on how to balance the budget and how to do this and another report on that. And then a blue ribbon commission would come out with another report on how to do this to fix the country. Elon Musk is right. The time for reports is over. The time for action is now. And the action that needs to happen is that people who should not be, there's obviously money going out of the Social Security system to people who don't deserve it. And who are either stealing it or it's finding its way offshore. Who knows? But our federal government has never once in my lifetime, I'm 54 years old, has never once that I can remember actually tried to find out if the Social Security system has any fraud in it at all. We've never even looked. And so now we're looking and we're seeing that not only is the Social Security system filled with fraud, but so is Medicaid and Medicare, obviously. And so are so many other government programs that are set up. We've talked about this on this podcast a few times and also on the Climate Realism Show, that this whole, NGO system where Democrats are in government and they're connected to their politicians in Congress, and then they form an NGO outside the government that is funded by the government, and round they go, staffing that NGO to being in a government agency and taking the money and going around, and everybody gets rich except you and me. We get poorer because our tax money is taken away. And so I don't think it's actually going to work, but part of the, we're leaning into the idea that the legacy media is, be clowning itself as it always does. But the larger picture here is that the people are not listening to this. I know Chris watches CNN and MSNBC for us, but their ratings have never been lower. The circulations of the major newspapers in this country have never been lower in our lifetimes. We just learned this week that the New York Times has laid off half of its editorial staff, and more layoffs are to come. The Washington Post is laying off reporters left and right. And so these leftist propagandists can go start their own Substack somewhere that will be not read by anybody important. The American people have their eyes opened, and those eyes are not going to be shut again. We see the world now, finally, for how it is. And Elon Musk sees the Social Security system for what it is, which is a necessary program for every American, but one that is not sustainable in long term because of the amount of fraud and crime and stealing out of that system that we have.
Yeah, I just don't know how many examples of this I can take anymore, of the media taking some little sound bite, removing all of the context, and then parading that as truth. I mean, the most insane example to this day is the Donald Trump, their very fine people comment or whatever, where they were saying that the neo Yahtzees we're gonna get Yahtzee is gonna become the new thing that just is not allowed in society because of you, Jim, because of this. But yeah, when you watch the actual clip, he says, no, except for those guys, they're the worst. They should be condemned entirely. You've just cut all of that out, just save the very fine people, and that's the truth for the rest of the time. But I don't know. I get it. The media, the legacy media, is not what it used to be. But it still seems to be where all of this stuff kind of flows through all of these other channels that people watch. I mean, so frequently, a family member or friend will come to me and they'll ask me something like in regards to this story. Oh, what do you think about Elon Musk's comments about eliminating Social Security? So then, the issue, because I always hear it from them first, it's just I know that it's coming from a broken premise. I can't comment on Elon's comments because I don't trust the media is accurately relaying that information to you to ask me about it. So then it becomes a homework assignment where I have to go and find the truth. Then I have to go back to them and respond that the whole thing was a broken premise. It's tiring, but it just seems like old hat for the media. So Chris, the media lying aside, what are your thoughts on the idea of tackling entitlement spending to get government spending under control? I mean, you've told me a million times that the entitlement programs are kind of the big elephant in the room when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, a couple things here. So I think your comparison to Charlottesville was spot on, and I've heard a lot of other people make that same comparison where they're just obviously taking it out of context on purpose. I mean, that is intentional. That is not
Right.
just we're trying to fit it
Malicious.
into a soundbite. It is. It absolutely is. Okay, so first I do want to comment on that. A couple other things. Ever since I've been following politics, for the past 20 something years, the entitlements have been the third rail. the taboo topic. You can't talk about them. And whenever there's a government shutdown or anything, like that, what do the Democrats and the mainstream media always do? This is going to affect your Social Security payments and Medicare. When that's never, ever been the case, will never be the case, because those are on autopilot. Those are going to go out whether there's a government shutdown or not. So I've seen this happen again and again. Okay, yes, that is, that is fact. Now, the entitlement programs, how much of the federal budget do they encapsulate? 70%. That's a huge amount. These programs are completely unsustainable. They were put in place in a time when, the population, especially the baby boomers, were able to make up the difference between the silent generation. But now that the baby boomers are retiring, there's not enough of us to keep the promises that have been made. And last time I checked, Congress did not put all that money that's supposed to be in Social Security into a trust fund. They spent it. It's gone. It has been gone for a very long time. The only way to get out of this situation is a pro-growth economic agenda. And that is exactly what Donald Trump is trying to do. The media, instead of saying, you know what, this is not going to happen in a day or a month, it's going to take, a couple of years probably, because if, companies are going to rebuild factories here, they can't just do that in a week. It's going to take a long time. So that's what this is about. This is about a pro-growth economic agenda that Donald Trump is trying to embark upon, because the only way that we can solve this problem is to have an explosion of economic growth. We've been, in this 1% growth model for a very long time. If we do, actually pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extension, the deregulation goes through, drill baby drill, and all this stuff, we will, I strongly believe, get back to 3%, maybe even 4 or 5% economic growth. That would make all these things moot, because economic growth is the only way to solve these problems. We cannot cut our way. We have to grow our way. Elon Musk knows that. Most economists know that. So, it's just so disingenuous when they're saying that he's trying to cut, Social Security payments to, like the little old lady who, survives on Social Security. It's not true. What he's trying to do, as Jim said earlier, and has been, said many, many, many times across the mainstream media, these programs are rife with fraud. Even the New York Times, I was quoted on this for a healthcare news article a couple of weeks ago. Even the New York Times admits that there's $500 billion in annual fraud in Medicaid. I pointed that out, and I got an email from someone, of course, saying, well, you just want to take away Medicaid and you don't want to deny healthcare to people. No, actually, I don't. No, not one bit at all. But I read stories all the time about rampant fraud, about, double billing, about, just so much stuff going on because it's, there's no incentive in place to check that this is on the up and up. And what, Elon Musk is trying to do, he's basically trying to audit these programs, just like he's also trying to audit the Department of Defense and the Department of Education and all these other departments. But these departments and these programs have been operating without any sort of accountability for so long that when it actually finally comes time to, implant that accountability, there are people who are going to, pull their hair out and, and smoke's going to come out of their ears. I say, let that happen. Let that happen. The American people are going to realize, wait a second, my benefits are not being cut. And, the only way we can actually solve this problem is a pro-growth economic agenda. And that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. And the media, instead of actually just giving him, a little bit of time, 50 days into his presidency, they're already saying the economy's in crashing, Trump recession, all this stuff. But what's so funny? For years, for two, maybe 3 years, when Biden's economy was a complete and utter mess and inflation was through the roof, what were the media saying, and what were the Democrats and the leftists all saying? Oh, well, first of all, it's not. First of all, they tried to gaslight us. Then they were saying, oh, it's only transitory. And then they're saying, well, it wasn't even Biden's fault in the first place. So just think of the dichotomy, the contrast between how the left gives I hate to make this so political, but I feel like it is political at this point in time. And I'm not trying to be like a partisan person, because I'm not saying that all the Democrats are, for wasteful spending and all the Republicans aren't. That's not true, obviously. But generally speaking, the Democrats and Chuck Schumer is doing this right now with this stopgap spending bill, saying we're gonna hold it up because we do not want this the CR to go through, and we do not want these tax cuts to be extended. And that's a very sad state of affairs. You would think at this point in time that the Democrats would say, you know what, we want to do what's good for the American people. What's good for the American people is to put these programs back on a sustainable, trajectory. In order to do that, of course, you need to cut the waste, fraud, and abuse, which we all know is widespread throughout these programs. But you also need to stop the fear mongering. And I'll just, I hope I'm not, blabbering here, but this, I see such a comparison and parallel between the fear mongering they do on entitlement programs, and the fear mongering they do on climate change, and the fear mongering they do on COVID, and all the fear mongering. That's what it is. It's trying to scare the American people. I think the American people are smarter than that. I think that they have seen through this, and you can't just keep crying wolf again. You just can't. At a certain point, the American people say, you know what? We've heard this before. You have already, played that card, and they're just not buying it. And I think that is making them more nuts.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I think it's hard for me to compare just because this has been like the reality of the last 8 to 10 years, however long Donald Trump's been in kind of the political spotlight. But like, that's just the political rhetoric has just gotten so lazy, where it's just people have just held up Donald Trump as the political North Star, that we align with him completely or we align against him completely. And if they say they're going to cut $1 in waste or fraud when it comes to Social Security or entitlement programs, that just means he wants to get rid of all of it. When you can go back not that far, Jim was talking about this with me just the other day, where you could find clips from 2008 where Bernie Sanders and like Nancy Pelosi are talking about how there's a lot of fraud and waste in Social Security that needs to be dealt with. So were all of a sudden they're MAGA before? Were they MAGA back in 2008? Like, it's just so ridiculous that you could literally read a Bernie Sanders quote from 2008 right now and be accused of being some right-wing extremist. Like, that's how lazy everything has gotten. This is the clown world that we find ourselves in. And this is how ridiculous the media system has become. Jim, I'm going to give you first swing on this next topic, because this is a topic that you suggested while we were coming up with ideas for the show. And originally, I didn't really want to do this topic, the topic of COVID 5-year anniversary. But then I found this pretty interesting article from the Federalist that I thought would make a pretty good jumping off point for this conversation. So the article from the Federalist is titled "COVID Taught Americans to Stop Trusting a Government That Puts Them Last." So it's a really good article. You should go check it out. But generally, it talks about the double standards that were in place for average people and the politically connected. People banned from going to church while George Floyd protesters were being encouraged. Children getting their education stolen from them while Nancy Pelosi got special treatment at a hair salon. Everything, when it came to COVID, divided down political lines eventually, with the media carrying water whenever possible for the left side of things. You're hesitant about taking the vaccine? Well, you're killing grandma. You think this originated in a Chinese lab? You're a racist conspiracy theorist. You point out the hypocrisy of people being treated different? You're a right-wing extremist. So 5 years since COVID lockdowns, I think the most lasting effect of all of this, 5 years later, is the complete and utter severing of trust in the media and other institutions from many Americans. Jim, what's your thoughts on this?
Oh God. I mean, yeah, I'm going to get triggered here again just because COVID does tend to drive me a little bit crazy, but yeah, I mentioned it's the 5-year anniversary. I think it was March 11th. There was an NBA game. I know Andy Singer, our producer, is a big NBA fan. I believe it was a Utah Jazz. Rudy Gobert was the first NBA player to be diagnosed with as positive for COVID, and then all hell broke loose. They canceled the game, I think, in the middle of the game, and then suddenly universities and sporting events were being canceled all over the place, and it was just really weird. The NCAA tournament was going on. I think they played 1 day worth of games and realized, people sweating and breathing in each other's faces when we're telling everybody that there's this new disease that will kill everyone is probably not a good idea. And then we were told, hey guys, just 2 weeks to stop the spread. Let's all do our part. Let's all pitch in. And I did so, and everybody around the world did so. But we were lied to from the very beginning. And really, I think COVID, I was already kind of, just constitutionally, I'm very skeptical of government and distrusting of government and authority anyway. I mean, that's why I'm a conservative or a libertarian, however you want to label me. But COVID really exposed the utter corruption and, frankly, evilness of governments in the West that we thought, we couldn't get that bad. And I remember on this podcast telling you and Justin and Chris that I really didn't think that it was going to last very long. And by last, I mean the lockdowns and all the restrictions on our liberties. I thought the American people were not going to stand for that. And boy, was I disappointed. And boy, was everybody disappointed, because we did accept basically living in a totalitarian state for a long, long time. And, the COVID was the totalitarian model. It was the test case. The Western governments used China as the example, not as something, not as a cautionary tale, but as an example of how they needed to run societies. And everything they told us about COVID turned out to be false, either intentionally false because they were lying to us to control us, or I'm not even going to give the benefit of the doubt. There were no mistakes. Okay. There were no mistakes. It was all intentional lying, gaslighting, and totalitarian control over the people. See how far and how far they could push it, how much they could get away with. Were the American people really going to wave goodbye to their grandma through a window at the old age home because you're not allowed to be in there and hold her hand as she passes? Are they really not going to allow people to have proper funerals for those loved ones that were left to die alone? The answers to both those questions were yes. We lived through that. That is what we had to endure. Thank goodness nobody actually in my family had passed away or gotten sick or was in the hospital during that time. But, we still had to, you remember the arrows on the ground? You could only walk this way down this aisle in the grocery store. And if you saw something and you missed it, you can't go back because, oh my gosh, you might breathe on somebody. All the mask nonsense, all the separation nonsense. It was all arbitrary. None of it was real. And the topper of all of that, of course, is that anybody who just entertained something outside the government line on the cause of COVID, the origins of COVID, the dangers of COVID, anything. The government under Joe Biden shut you down, silenced you, tried to get you canceled. I remember being on what was then called Twitter, and I was accused by people of wanting to murder people because I wasn't taking COVID seriously enough. And so, yeah, I think it's the 5-year anniversary. I think a lot of us just kind of don't want to remember how traumatic and terrible the COVID regime that was put in place in this country and in governments all over the West. We just want to forget it happened. It's easier to not remember than it is to remember. And I think we should always remember what our government is capable of, even on this level, even in the United States, and that it could get a lot worse than that. And just one last, everybody's got their own COVID stories. Mine is that I had to go on an international trip. I had to get the vaccine and a booster in order to leave the country. And then before I could come home, I had to take a COVID test on camera with a government bureaucrat. And I had to remain on camera so that I didn't cheat on the test. And I had to sit there with that person for 15 minutes waiting for my test results. And then we opened them up together and I showed it on screen. If that was an error, if that was a bad test, if there was some mistake in it and it said I was positive, too bad. I would have had to stay in that outside of my own country for another week at my own expense. And that's just one little example of how insane the world got over COVID. And we must not forget it. We have to remember it. You may not want to get as triggered as I do. And a lot of it is quite silly, but a lot of it is very serious because we cannot go through that again. Because I don't think if the government is able to do all of that again, I don't think they're going to give it up ever again. And we will live in a complete totalitarian state.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think just kind of anecdotally, I think that there was a lot of people around me, whether it's friends or family, kind of getting red pilled during the whole lockdown thing, or the way the media was treating everything, the way that they were reporting on everything. I remember specifically, if we're going to go through these kind of stories or whatever,
well,
I remember one.
Can I just go in a completely different direction here?
Well, I'm going to let
really-
you go in a different direction.
Okay, because
I'm
I've
gonna let you
got something that I really want to get off my chest about this.
Absolutely, that's totally fine. But I remember that there was like one moment where there was this glimmer of hope in the heart of the lockdowns, where there was like, oh, there might be this thing that's effective for treating COVID. It's called I forget what it's even called. I think
Ivermectin?
it's the
Oh, don't say
yeah.
it. Oh, geez.
Oh no.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, so so it was like that. And I was like, oh great, like that's fantastic. Some low cost thing that's already out there. We can start treating people with it. And it was like before anyone could even like decide whether or not it was truly effective, the media came down like a hammer on anyone that would even suggest.
Absolutely
that
agree
there
with you.
was-
Okay, but why did they do that? But why? You know why? This goes back to 2016. It was all because of Donald Trump. And I'm not trying to say that Donald Trump is this like infallible figure. He's a very flawed man. But you know what is so different from Donald Trump in all the years that I've studied American history, and especially since I've been engaging in this world? He's an outsider. He's not a politician. And he says it like it is. And I think that in 2016, when the left just assumed that, of course, Hillary Clinton's going to take over for Barack Obama and the transformation of America is just going to keep going forward. And it was such a, like a seismic blow to them that let's think back for a second. 2017, 2018, 2019, all they tried to do was get rid of him. And then in 2020, or I should say late 2019, it was November 2019, when this stuff started happening in China, what did they do? They realized, oh, this is how we can do it. So what did they do? And by they, I mean, Fauci and the mainstream media and big pharma and just, the usual suspects. They tried to make it seem as if Donald Trump is personally responsible for COVID-19, which is just ridiculous on its face. Okay. So they tried to use it as a cudgel to get rid of him. They knew, and I will go to my death believing this, that Fauci and Birx and all those people knew that it was not nearly as contagious, or, well, I shouldn't say contagious because it was contagious, but not especially from child to adults. So the whole school thing was a total joke, and they knew that early on. We know that, but it was not nearly as deadly. We know that. And what did they do? They went out of their way to make it appear as bad as possible. So I remember writing about this stuff because I was in total shock when I was watching this happening in real time. Wow, someone died of a car accident. Someone died in a car accident, but they had COVID. So now they're COVID death. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So what they tried to do is they tried to manipulate. They tried to spin and skew all of it. So it looked like it was as bad as possible, thinking now we can get rid of this guy. And it kind of worked, unfortunately. Unfortunately, it did. But you know what? Another thing. So Jim, Donnie, and I, we experienced COVID in Illinois. Illinois was terrible. Blue state. It made it as difficult as possible. My brother at the time was living in Georgia. Totally different. Georgia actually was ahead of the curve. They were even above Florida and saying, no, we're not doing any of this stuff. I went down to visit my brother, I want to say Memorial Day weekend of 2021, maybe 2020. And it was like I entered like a different universe down there. It was like people don't wear masks everywhere, and you can actually like go into the store. Like, this is just blowing my mind right now. So I think that us three might have been just a little bit biased, or not, I shouldn't say biased, but we see it through the prism of the Illinois model, but that was not the case in all the states. So I
just imagine if we were living in Australia.
Well, yeah, or New Zealand for that matter, or even in Europe or in Germany where it was, 10 times worse. Yeah, exactly. So I do want to, put that out there. And, as a former teacher, I pay very close attention, Nation's Report Card, and just, it's like statistics like coming out. And when I see that at the most recent Nation's Report Card that our 8th graders are proficient at reading at a 28% rate, and math is, I think, 31%, that is really, really sad. And you know what? I'm not saying that it was totally due to COVID, but without a doubt, I mean, I was a teacher. I know how this stuff works. If you tell kids don't come to the classroom for a year and a half to 2 years, they're gonna go backwards. They're gonna go backwards big time. Not only intellectually in terms of math and science and history and all that stuff, but also socially. And I mean, this is anecdotal. This is but I have seen a lot of studies, that show this. But this is just my little anecdotal, world. I see kids now who are 15, 16, 17 years old. they're not as normal as I would expect them to be in terms of, interacting with people, in terms of looking at me in the eye when I'm speaking to them, like that kind of stuff. I cannot help but wonder if locking them in their rooms for a year to a year and a half, ruining, one of the best times of their life, whether it's going to prom or whatever it is, graduation. I mean, that stuff matters. I remember that stuff in my life, and it was a great time in my life. To just say, no, you don't get that because we have some political, aim that we are trying to achieve, and using them as pawns. That to me is just beyond the pale. So that's why I view these people in a very negative light. I view them literally, and I don't use this word lightly, evil. Dr. Fauci, evil, totally evil, because they were. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to, and you're right. And the upshot of this, the only really good outcome of all of this is the absolute destruction of the trust of institutions in this country that never earned them in the first place. And we're just kind of using them and you abuse that authority. The whole public health authorities, who can trust them again?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, generally speaking, people didn't have an opinion. Your average person didn't have an opinion on the World Health Organization. Your average person didn't have an opinion on the National Institute of Health. Your average person didn't even know who Anthony Fauci was. But like all of this just, it just tore down the general like perceived integrity of these institutions. Just tore it down. So
it did. And you know what? I mean, I almost feel like I was kind of guilty of that. Like, before this, I just generally trusted FBI. They generally do the right thing. Yeah, they're not perfect, but generally, like FDA, generally they do the right thing. They're looking out for my best interests. Wow, has that changed? Especially when I saw what they did with the definition of a vaccine and how they gave these vaccine makers who, remember this, it's not a vaccine. It never was and never is. Blanket immunity. What is that about?
Right. So
and
the
then
media
you force us to take it, and then you say if something bad happens to you, which we know bad things did happen, heart conditions and all that kind of stuff. We know that did happen. Saying, well, you have no recourse. Like what?
Right.
What is that about?
Yeah, no, thanks to you for bringing up the education stuff too, because that's also like a very long-lasting effect that might have generational impacts too. So yeah, definitely can't forget about that. We're at an hour mark, but we got to get to our last topic here. This is a pretty important one. So JP Morgan Chase has agreed to update their code of conduct to protect against religious and political discrimination in what activists are calling a major win in the fight against debanking. So political debanking is an issue that we've talked about for a while. I know that we've done a few episodes of this show talking about it specifically. This was an issue that we took on here at the Heartland Institute after we got really involved in the, combating ESG, banks refusing services to people based on their political beliefs or to protect from to protect their ESG rankings, that sort of thing. So with a Republican-controlled White House and Congress, we were really trying to increase the pressure to that, for policymakers to do something about this issue. So Justin Haskins, who you've seen on the show surely, has been flooding the zone with op-eds and notable publications about this issue. And just the last month, he had a piece in Town Hall titled "A New Bill Would Crush Banks That Discriminate Against Conservatives and Christians." In The Federalist, he had an article titled "Fair Access Bill Would Finally Stop Activist Banks from Discriminating Against Conservatives." And in The Blaze, he had a piece titled "Mr. President, Stop Woke Banks from Targeting Conservatives and Christians." Well, it turns out we didn't have to wait for legislative action. JP Morgan Chase went ahead and amended their code of conduct to introduce language that would stop the banking giant from debanking people based on their political beliefs. So considering JP Morgan's role in the larger banking sector, this is a big win. The group Alliance Defending Freedom, who has been really at the forefront of this particular issue, put out a press release in light of JP Morgan Chase's announcement, saying in part, quote, "This is a major victory for free speech and religious freedom in the marketplace." So, we'll just go through this real quick because we're already at over an hour. But this is a great thing. This is something that we've been wanting to happen. The idea that these banks would kind of take this action by themselves without, government mandates is a fantastic thing. So let's just take 1 second to celebrate. Woohoo! All right, but back to reality. There's a little bit of a what's the opposite of a silver lining of a dark cloud? Because there's an opposite. We got a nice sunshine, but there's a little glimpse of something bad, which is the question of whether or not this kind of takes the pressure off of kind of codifying this into law. So now, is there pressure for lawmakers or the president to mandate this and do like some sort of fair access type thing that would prevent banks from doing this in the future? Because it seems like the pressure is off. These banks are already doing it. But what's stopping these banks from undoing this code of conduct switch when, the next president takes over, or, people with D's in front of their name take over Congress or something along those lines? So I don't want to just like, all right, great, we're done. Let's stick a flag in this and move on to the next topic, because I feel like the progress that we've made on this issue could easily be walked back in just a few short years. Jim, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, we have talked about the debanking, and it's all tied in with ESG, and it's tied in with the so-called social credit scores and all of that stuff that they have in China, and that was kind of slow walked or softly imposed in the West. I saw today that I think the Trump organization, so not the president himself, but his company, sued. Who is it? They sued Capital One Bank over the being debanked. This is really evil. And yes, you are right. There needs to be a law passed that bans what should be upheld in courts, but there ought to be a law just to make it easier, because it's expensive and difficult if an ordinary person is debanked because of their political views. A friend of ours, and who's been on the show, the Climate Realism show with us, Jason Isaac. This is similar to this. Jason Isaacs. He's head of the American Energy Institute. Formerly, he was with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and his insurance company, The Hartford, canceled him. They said, we cannot insure the American Energy Institute, which is a nonprofit organization, because you guys advocate for the drilling and use of fossil fuels, which we cannot support as a company. And it's part of our DEI and ESG and all the other stuff that we do here in this company that has nothing to do with making money or providing services, but has to do with a political agenda. Because you do not align with that, Jason Isaac, you are out. What? Correct. And so we'll see if the Hartford, which I believe actually, I think I've had some dealings with the Hartford. Let's just say that. So I might be getting a phone call or a letter pretty soon. But this is all of the same thing, Donnie, that there are companies that are putting politics and canceling people, canceling insurance, debanking them. One of Trump's lawyers, John Eastman, was debanked and disbarred and destroyed. The American Bar Association tried to make it so that any attorney who ever represented any Trump affiliate or official or somebody adjacent to Trump would be harassed and to the end of their life and disbarred and all this sort of stuff. So it's debanking is part of the weaponization of both the private sector and government against perceived political enemies. We are seeing that there is a cost to that on the left now too, and hopefully there will be a truce on this sort of thing. And it cannot happen in America that you are quote unquote debanked or uninsured or run out of your profession and not allowed to hold, say, a medical license. They did that. They were trying to go after the medical license. Gosh, all these things come back into your head. During COVID of Jay Bhattacharya, they tried to get his medical license revoked. I mean, these are the sorts of things that when the left thought they would be in control forever, we're happily engaging in. And now they are starting to see that the tables have turned, that these are actually not good ideas, and that Americans in a free country like America should not even think about abusing their power, be it public or private, in such ways. Hopefully we can go back to living like that, which is how we've lived our lives and run our society for more than 200 years.
Yep. It's insane. Yeah, and you're right. It's like, as I'm like thinking about this stuff, all of these memories that we've been covering this for like, a couple of years now. It's just like, oh yeah, this happened and that happened too. It just comes kind of pouring back. But Chris, I'm going to give you final thoughts on this topic or any topic that we talked about on this episode before we wrap up the show.
Well, as much as I would love to talk about the Up in Smoke tour in 2000, I'm going to put that for another day. And I'm going to talk about this because this matters a lot. And I take what Jamie Dimon said, the head of JP Morgan Chase, with a boulder of salt, because I don't think he really means it. I think he's only doing this because Donald Trump won the election, and it looks like there's been a sea change, not only in the political landscape, but also in the cultural landscape. So I think he's just looking at the political winds and saying, okay, better do this because that's going to be good for business. I don't think this is a principled stand on behalf of Jamie Dimon whatsoever. I think Jamie Dimon is totally, doing this for political reasons. I also think it was stupid in the first place, because why would Jamie Dimon and Bank of America and all these other, Citi, whomever, Wells Fargo, why would they want to restrict their clientele? It just doesn't make sense. But then you think, oh, well, they did it because they wanted to, stay in good with the Biden administration and all the ESG stuff and all the, crony stuff that was going on there. So I don't think that this is enough. I saw, and I think I posted it in the in our little Slack thread, that Tim Scott, one of my favorite senators, had proposed a bill that would actually codify this in a law, and I think that's great. Here's what I think would apply mostly to reputational risks, so it'd be like firearms dealers and stuff like that. But I think every single person in the United States, has a right to have a, financial service provider. Now, I'm not saying that JP Morgan Chase has an obligation to offer services to every single American, but I don't think that it's okay for them to say, well, we're not going to work with you because we just don't like what you say, what you do, or what you believe in. That's what I think this is truly about. And I've been, I'm kind of a hypocrite on this. I do have accounts at Chase and I do have accounts at Bank of America. And the reason why is because of convenience. They have lots of ATMs. It's easy for me to move funds and just do all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, Donnie, I think I told you like years ago when I was like, hey, my Bank of America, they're like giving me this thing called an ESG score. And they're kind of telling me like, hey, we want you to invest more in this kind of stuff. And that definitely rubbed me the wrong way. Now I have, stayed with B of A and I still have an account with, Chase. However, I'm not changing my investments one iota. They can, make me do that. But I do think that this is something that is not an institutional change. It's not permanent. It's basically they are trying to, stay on the good side of, the new administration. And they know that the new administration does not look kindly upon banks that discriminate against people based on their political views or whatever else. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good step, but by no means should we be, celebrating the streets yet. I think we got to get this codified into law. And, that's what I think is the real solution here.
Yeah. What's the craziest thing? And this kind of goes back to the first topic that we were talking about. Is that like this, potential legislative solutions to this idea of, these banks discriminating against people based on their political beliefs pretty much divides down ideological lines or, left versus right lines where you have the left defending banks with their right to discriminate against people. This is the world that we live in now, folks.
Well, let's also remember that in the 2000 financial crisis, when the big banks were not exactly behaving perfectly, although I don't blame them solely, what happened? They got bailed out, and Barack Obama and Tim Geithner, two people who I am not a big fan of these days, they basically empowered them like never before. And this whole notion of too big to fail. Right. I think that's really, like the genesis of a lot of this, bad stuff where Bank of America and, Chase and Citi and Wells Fargo have way too much market share. They're way too big for their own britches. I would love to see, a more decentralized banking system. I just don't know if that's going to happen in the foreseeable future, but that would be my dream.
Yep. Well, stay tuned because these are topics that we will continue to talk about on the In the Tank podcast with your regular host, Linnea Lucan, who will be joining the show back next week. So you'll be able to look at her instead of me, which is a net positive for the In the Tank podcast for sure. Let me see if I could do this outro because I haven't done it in a couple of months. But I want to thank everyone for joining the show every Thursday at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. Join the conversation. Throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. You cannot support us monetarily on YouTube through Super Chats because we've been demonetized, but you can can still go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly that way. And that way, YouTube doesn't take a 25-30% cut or anything like that. If you are listening to the audio-only version, leave a review on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. You can consider joining us live on Thursdays at noon Central Time, like I said. And if you are watching us live, you could help out the show, not by spending $1, but by spending a couple of seconds hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, or just leaving a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. If you have any comments or questions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com, and feel free to follow us on X at inthetankpod. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on X, at Heartland Inst on X, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
I'm going to pitch the country because I just want to make this just abundantly clear. I've been watching this stuff for 25 years now. I've never been more optimistic. I've never been, more, positive. I've never been, more proud. And, this is not going to be perfect. There are going to be some, hiccups along the way, but America's back on the right path. And that just makes me so proud.
Fantastic. And for everyone that wants to, make sure you tune into the Climate Realism Show, which will be taking place on all of these same channels tomorrow, Fridays at noon Central Time. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.